You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senate?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do this a little differently because of what Larry Arnn just said. When a guy like Larry Arnn tells you this is 1860, pay attention, right? Last weekend, what was it, 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord? There's a lot of water between now and next July 4th, right? And July 4th is not totally and completely, I think, celebrated right here in the United States. You know, we do the barbecues, the cooks, the birthday of the country. Remember, on the day it was actually signed, before they promulgated it, the British landed in Staten Island. The largest expeditionary force in the history of man landed, and by August, it was a total and complete throwdown. We had the American Thermopylae in Brooklyn. A couple weeks later, the American Dunkirk right there at Brooklyn Heights to get the army, save the army, get them to Manhattan. One retreat after another, all the way back on the other side of the Delaware, where they dug in and waited to Christmas night. We celebrate the 4th of July like it was a document that was a declaration of war of men who knew that they were putting it all on the line and would be hung as traitors if we lost. When Larry Arnn says it's 1860, he's not kidding. I want you to think about that for a second. What happened in 1860? And how were we inexorably drawn to a civil war? The only thing I disagree with Larry Arnn is that we're not kind of in a war, we're in a war. And every one of you here, just like Trump and Navarro and Bannon and many others, Tom Barrack, better be ready to go to prison and ready to be bankrupt and ready to be debanked. It is very uncertain what the outcome of this is. Divine providence has been with us in 16. I was there at a ringside seat. We had a man, we had a plane, we had no money, no organization, self-organized. One time he was 10 to 12 points down to Hillary Clinton in August, mid-August. Then later we closed it up and he got down another 6 or so on the Billy Bush weekend, and we pulled it off because of his tenacity in reaching Americans who would never vote for a Republican in their entire life because they saw something in Trump, right? And then remember that administration attacked every day by the deep state and the administrative state? Every day. I had 60 hours in front of the Mueller Commission and the House Intelligence Committee with Schiff and Swalwell running it. Why were they running it? Because Paul Ryan, a Republican, punched out and turned it over to the Democrats and the House Intelligence Committee. And I've got legal bills to prove it, as other people do too. Why? For hours and hours and hours, they want to get you in a perjury trap, so you flip on Trump. I was there in 20 when Donald John Trump won his second term. Yeah. Hell yeah, he won it. There's no question he won it. But divine providence works in mysterious ways, right? Think about if the second term had been then. We weren't ready. We weren't ready the first time. Larry knows this. He helped us in the transition the first time. We didn't have the policies. We didn't have the bench. We didn't have the depth. But think about when President Trump was forced back and went to Mar-a-Lago on the afternoon of 20 January 2020. Remember how dark that was? Right? Remember the folks watching the war room? Boris is sitting there on the tarmac at Andrews Air Force Base, and there was not a lot of official DC there. Remember that? And what was it when Trump got there? He's like a lion in winter, correct? He knew he had won, and he knew they had stolen it. Right then, in those first couple of days, he made one of the most courageous and morally focused clarity decisions in American history. You can read Jack Kennedy's or Ted Sorensen's Profile in Courage to the 10th power, all of them wrap it up. Trump understood if he played the game and took a big book deal and started buying more golf courses and getting the open rota and over in the United Kingdom and getting to the PGA rota here, life would be fine, right? He had a great family, beautiful wife, young. He's still young and vibrant. He made a decision to return. Just like Cincinnatus, back from the plow to save his country. Nobody in American history has ever made that decision, understanding he knew they were going to bankrupt him. He knew they were going to try to put him in prison. He knew they were going to try to destroy him and his family. And he made the decision, I'm coming back. And remember how many people abandoned him. Think about it. And let me start with Fox News and the Murdochs. For 2 years, he wasn't live on TV. As they put up every Republican, standard Republican, good people, fine people. They're not going to be president of the United States, and they're certainly not going to be president of the United States when the nation has a crisis. And think about that, coming all the way back. Remember those dark years of 21 and 22, how tough it was, how we had to grind? But divine providence was there because we saw that these are not typical Democrats. These are radical Marxists. It was like the Stasi. Remember the billboards, right? Turning your neighbor in. Remember the speeches that Biden would give at Independence Hall? As a sacrilege to the most sacred places we have in this country. There's no depth to what they would do. As we now find out, for Tulsi Gabbard puts out their plan that we talked about for years, what they did in COVID, what they did with the vaccines, what they did with the mandates over and over and over again. That's a Marxist. This is cultural Marxism with the heavy hand of totalitarian control and state capitalism. It's the Chinese Communist Party model. And we grinded through it. And what happened in that time? Two important things. The precinct strategy. People started getting engaged because you know why? It's about human agency. If Lexington and Concord shows us anything, it's that. There's nothing foreordained. It's all about you in that defining moment on Lexington Common, hiding Sam Adams and John Hancock. At Concord Bridge when you know they're coming. That was you. On the precinct strategy to give him a political infrastructure, finally organize people and take over the Republican Party from the precinct level to the county level, to the state level, as MAGA Republicans. And at the same time, and this is what's so important, public intellectuals and heroes like Brooks Rollins and the people at America First Party Institute to start a think tank, Stephen Miller at America First Law to start something legally to think through these issues. Russ Vogt in that team of Mark Paoletta, Jeff Clark, all of them are with CRA. And the project that has no name, Project 2025. Right? A coordination effort. These are people who put it on the line. They would never be hired by anybody else in doing this. These were MAGA policies to make sure that in the certainty that everybody had that we're going to win, but we have to be ready this time. We have to have policies. We have 100 days. We have to understand this. We have to have teams and cadres that have worked together. of the 3,000 or 4,000 people that we never filled those billets in the first term because we didn't have the bench. You have it now. I think Sergio told me the other day it's 3,000 people. That's how you have Days of Thunder. I gave that PBS interview years ago. I said, if we had one or two things, that'd be flooding the zone. This is flooding the zone when you have 10. As Larry said, you read it every day. You got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things in every different vertical. Well thought through. Tight executive orders, executive actions, presidential memorandums. This is what's driving it. It's that combination of a political apparatus that's grassroots and people are using their agency. They're getting off the sofa and say, I'm in for this. That's how Trump won. People went door to door in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, in Arizona and Georgia. Why? Because the Trump voter, those voters, a lot of low information, low propensity voters, doesn't mean they're stupid or don't have college education. They're just not interested in politics. But they will come out if you go get them. And we won. Think about that. We won. But Larry Arnn says we're in 1860. And Larry Arnn is right. When we won on that night, you guys watching the War Room broadcast, I said, get ready. We're about to have the mother of all battles. And then the inauguration came, and all the tech bros are there, and all the crypto guys, and they're running around, they're all in tuxedos, all big party. I said, fine, party, it's great. Enjoy yourself, we have to do that. It's part of it, historically part of it. But I said then, before we get to 100 days, we're going to be in a gunfight. And I want to know who the summer soldiers and the sunshine patriots are, who's with us in 100 days. Because Trump ain't backing off. He did not risk 300 years in prison. And remember, they wanted to send him to prison to die in prison. If you don't understand that, you do not understand the man's sacrifice. They wanted to send him to prison to die in prison. And if they steal 2028, they will send Trump to prison. We're in it now. We have now the convergence because our political class and the sociopathic overlords on Wall Street and the corporatists and the oligarchs in Silicon Valley, and we haven't made these tough choices when we had chances to make them. We're in now the convergence of multiple crises that's going to lead to late in the year of 1860 and into 1861. We have the three verticals, as I talk about on the show, and I'm going to add the administrative state in a second, but the three verticals. One, we're in the kinetic part of the Third World War. We're not kind of in a, before, this is World War III. If you look at World War II from September 1939 in Poland to the Wehrmacht going after the Russians in June of 1941 of Operation Barbarossa, all that time, the fall of France, Dunkirk, the Battle of Britain, North Africa, throw in Finland and some other, in fall of France, a couple 100,000 people, bad. There's 1.5 million people dead or wounded in Ukraine. It looks like Dresden in 1945. Look at Gaza. We got 2 carrier battle groups off the southern tip of Saudi Arabia. You read the paper today. They're running sorties every day. We're in the kinetic part of the Third World War, and President Trump's trying to stop that war. Stop the shooting part of it at least. Figure out some rapprochement with the Russians and maybe pull them out of the Chinese Communist Party's sphere on the Eurasian landmass. The other is the deportations of 10 million illegal alien invaders that came here on Biden's watch, totally coordinated, not chaos, highly thought through. Just look at the numbers. The number in the reconciliation bill is $170 billion to recreate and rebuild what ICE needs to get them out of here. And look at the Supreme Court. Part of the converging crisis is a constitutional crisis, folks, that's going to be front and center in June or July of this year. when they step in front of, the unified executive theory, or as Mike Davis refers to it, Article 2, powers of the president, to number one, be the chief executive and make decisions about who works in the government and who doesn't and how many, and about budgets, about impounding budgets, that the appropriations bill is one thing, but he can impound because he's chief executive. So says the Constitution. Number two, he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And no judge on earth can come between him as commander-in-chief and what he thinks is an action that should be taken. And the third, it's not an independent DOJ. He's the chief magistrate and the chief law enforcement officer of this government. They don't believe that. They don't believe any of it. They have 170 lawsuits right now to stop him, because to delay is to deny, and they know that. And the only thing they've got working is these radicals on the court. And right now they're going to force Boasberg and up to the Supreme Court a confrontation on a human trafficker. Understand who they're embracing. A human trafficker, because here's why. It's quite simple. They want to make it so tough to get the criminals out, so tough to get the gangs out, that you just give up on the 10 million. All 10 million illegal alien invaders must leave the country, or we don't have a republic. All of them. Remember Lankford? Remember the huge debates we had over the border bill and how much they threw it in Trump's face? Trump's terrible. This bill is going to cost, hundreds of billions of dollars, take 10 years to implement. Trump secured the border in 60 days. 60 days. Everything they tell you in Washington, D.C. is a bald-faced lie. 60 days. And he hadn't even started building the wall yet, which has to be built. But then you get to the main event. This unsustainable financial model we have and business model we have, this is insanity. It's insanity. It's not going to affect future generations. It's here now. The deficit for the first 6 months is $1.3 trillion. We're going to have a $2.5 trillion deficit this year. The big, great, beautiful bill they're working on, $5 trillion debt ceiling relief. I think it's 2 years. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. And who on Capitol Hill is going to have the courage to do what needs to be done? We have to cut. No 10-year plan. I don't want a 10-year plan. This is a bankruptcy, and I deal with it like I dealt with bankruptcy at Goldman Sachs in my own firm. This is a restructuring. I care about this year, and I care about next year. And I care about cash in, and I care about cash out. I don't want to hear any happy talk on some 10 years, and you're not going to give me conservative wins and, $1.2 trillion and $3 trillion of 10 years. I don't care about year 4. I don't care about year 5. They don't exist. You know why? You pulled that scam for years and years and years. And here's where we are. I care about this year, and I care about next year. And we have to, look, I've got differences with Elon, but I fully support Doge. I want to find out and see actually where that cash saving is. We need to see that. One reason we need to see it, we can't let the political class off the hook of thinking that some fairy godmother is going to come in here and wave a magic wand. Every easy decision is a long time ago. We only have tough decisions now, and only hard and tough people can make it and stick to it. Because we're converging, these crises are converging. You're going to have to cut defense, and you're going to have to cut Medicaid, and you're going to have to cut social programs. And all these cuts are not going to be easy. But the question I have, and I spent 8 years as a naval officer, 3.5, 4 at sea, and 3.5, 4 at the Pentagon in Reagan's first years. I'm a Hawk. My daughter's a West Point grad, 101st in Iraq. So we got skin in the game. But I say this out of love and respect for the military. You can't spend $1 trillion, folks. Not going to happen. Think about this. Think of the absurdity of this. The EU says tonight as we walk in here, they're not going to decouple. These deals that Scott Bessent's putting out there that they're working on has basically a part of it that says in the trading part, because you're just going to get the architecture, you're going to get the overall framework. But in there, you're kind of with us, and we're going to work at these non-tariff barriers and the tariffs, and we're going to figure it out, but you're kind of in our camp. And you're certainly not in the CCP's camp. The EU informed us tonight, well, they're not going to decouple. They're not going to allow that. I go, isn't that interesting? We have 2 carrier battle groups. That's about, I don't know, 20,000 sailors, young men and women. You know what a battle group is? A carrier with a carrier wing, right? They can get over the decks, American power projection with cruisers and destroyers and frigates. As a young man, I was on one of those destroyers in the North Arabian Sea for the Iranian hostage crisis, that fiasco. So I know what it is to steam over there. I know what those young people are going through. We have 2 guarding the Red Sea. Why? To keep the Suez Canal open. So NATO and the EU can get oil from the Straits of Hormuz and goods from China. 3% of that traffic goes through the Suez Canal as the United States. Now, I realize there's military activity there with the Houthis. I also am not a supporter of that. 2 carrier battle groups. The entire EU has a Royal Navy destroyer, a French frigate, and an Italian corvette. To the EU, screw you. Start picking up your own tab. We've turned our military. I go to this conference yesterday, and I tell them, well, Steve, some days, Trump says stuff and the stock market goes up. I said, I don't give a damn what the stock market does every day. It's a casino. That's not investors. That's computers trading with each other. These young kids, I don't care about that. That's a casino, and a casino's mentality. And what they've turned our beloved military into is basically rent-a-cops for the casino. That must stop. President Trump's genius of the hemispheric defense from Greenland to the Panama Canal is a naval strategy to block the Russian submarines. Up in Murmansk and Archangels, they come through, we got them. And no Chinese Navy through the Panama Canal and not turning the Caribbean into a Chinese lake, right? And use the vast Pacific. The vast Pacific is our heartland for strategy. This is Mackinder for us. With the 3-island chain, where Pete Hegseth went it first. Now, I respectfully submit, we don't need $1 trillion for that, right? It's time we stop paying for the casino. We stop paying. This casino already destroyed the heartland of this country and working class people in this country and the middle class of this country. Why do you think they love Trump? Trump is the first and only person, even Reagan, as great as he was, that they said, hey, not in the room, not in the deal, and that guy's put me in the room, he's put me at the head of the table. People know nothing about politics, nothing about Republican orthodoxy, support Trump. That coalition's a 1932 type coalition. But we got to go through some choppy water. Larry Arnn says we're in 1860, and you know what? He's right. These crises are converging. Think about this for a second. You got to cut the defense budget by $200 billion. Now, not in 10 years, now. You then have to Medicaid, but Medicaid, you got to be smart about it. Because there's a lot of MAGA on Medicaid. You know why? There's no good paying manufacturing jobs in this country. You can tell. Do you think MAGA, they don't want a handout? They don't want government assistance? You think those people, as proud and tough as they are, they want that? Hell no. They have to have it. 9 million of them have 2 jobs. There's what? 20% of the $1.4 trillion credit card debt is non-performing right now? What percentage of that is MAGA? What percentage of that is working class Americans that need that credit card to gap their expenses? These people are the same people that were in the 8th Air Force over Germany. The same people at Normandy, the same people at Tarawa and Peleliu, the same exact people. They've been abandoned by a political class and a commercial class that has abandoned them and abandoned their interests and put interests of other nations and other people and other countries and money and power ahead of their interest. And Trump's the first one to come and say, no, we're going to make America great again. Right? And they've responded to it. And Larry Arnn is right. And this is why I say, and he drives Morning Joe and this crowd up a tree, their heads blow up. We've had many great men and women in this country and great political leaders and people like President Reagan and others. But we've had 3 that countries don't get in a lifetime. General Washington at the birth of this nation, the birth of the republic, both on the battlefield and then as president, because of the respect he had, and people had respect for him. President Lincoln, if you studied it, kind of ran the deal as a warlord, right? One particularly, if he had to shred the Constitution on certain things, or as he and Seward would say, the inherent powers of the executive, is the way he would describe it, he would do it. Because he realized this country is being torn apart. There was going to be 2 countries, and they had a vision of what this country would be. So the rebirth of the nation. And Trump is here at the rejuvenation and the regeneration of that nation. And we've got one shot. One shot. And it's going to be determined very simply. Who doesn't quit? Right? They got more money and more power in the media and the universities. They got it all. They got every institution in this country. But we're finding out, number one, our institutions are pretty good, right? I went to Harvard, and I would take Hillsdale any day of the week. Because he's got the guts to tell the federal government, whether Trump, I don't want your money, I don't need your money, because with your money comes control. And that's the problem at Harvard. Hey, you can do anything you want. You can have any group of people you want, but you don't take any taxpayer money. Cut the money off. Cut it all off. And don't put all the burden on the Jewish students and the Jewish people. It's far deeper than that. They ought to purge. Number one, it ought to be 200 of these Marxists in the faculty have to go. And 200 in the administration. And I'm a big believer you go to the public Ivies, and the first 2 I would start with is Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Madison, Wisconsin, right? You go there and say, guess what? The $4 billion stops tomorrow, and here's a list of 200 professors and 200 administrators. When they're gone, the money starts coming back, and not a second beforehand. Cut them off. Larry Arnn brought up the law firms. What has Trump's fight shown us? These are the law firms are now, with the private equity and how they've interacted with the private equity, are the most powerful institutions because of the connective tissue that are interlocking to the capital markets and to the corporatists. And these are powerful. And they picked the most powerful, not the biggest, but Paul Weiss, the most powerful, and Karp, the most powerful, organizing all this demonic activity. He broke them in 24 hours. How did he break them? How's he breaking Harvard? It's federal money. The whole system sucks off the federal tit. You cut off the money, and you know why Paul Weiss surrendered? They put a line in there, no security clearances, no government contracts. Oh, by the way, any clients you have, no government work. Paul Weiss had all their buddies at other law firms getting on, like jackals, getting on their clients. And the partners came and said, surrender. Skadden Arps, the most prominent law firm in mergers and acquisitions, the white shoe of the white shoe firms, 24 hours and $100 million for the good of the order. Because that money is all spent on these radical NGOs that are suing the government all the time with top quality lawyers, no more. And you know what lesson we learned? How many partners at law firms are those law firms that quit? Here's how many. None. They're gutless cowards. They're big talkers and big deal when they're in the shadows. You put them in the light, not one partner at any of these law firms have quit. A couple of associates have quit, and God bless you. You had your values and you stood up for them. The legal profession should be ashamed of itself. The finest law firms, this is the problem with the country. Why do you think the working class and middle class and they got stiffed? These are the most prominent institutions in the country. And guess what? All the universities are going to crater too, including Harvard. They're addicted to that federal money. And Trump's going to break them. As these crises converge, we're going to have years. Look at the Civil War. The Civil War wasn't the 3.5 years of combat. It's much longer than that, right? It was Reconstruction and everything that happened there. These wars take a long time. These divisions in countries, they can't be negotiated out, can't be debated out. This is not a debate. This is not a debating society. This is one side's going to win and one side's going to lose. And the side that doesn't quit is going to win. Now, there are going to be days that you feel like quitting. There are going to be days that it's overcast and dark and nothing's going right. In fact, there may be years like that. But here's why I feel good. I've seen 2 of those years in 21 and 22, right? And we didn't flinch. And we had his back. And we came to victory. And now it's to execute on that victory. But the convergence of deporting 10 million illegal alien invaders and making significant cuts along with the Defense Department in social programs, how do you think that's going to play on TV? Where do you think that, yeah. Even the discussion at OMB a couple of months ago about where just the money was and putting a freeze on it, sentiment meltdown. A human trafficker and criminals sends them into meltdown. We haven't seen the hard part yet. The hard part's to come. Let me be very blunt about this. If you falter, we're not going to make it. That puts tremendous responsibility. It can't be on Trump's shoulders. It can't be on the people around Trump's shoulders. It has to be on our shoulders. We know we have working class people in the precinct strategy and other places that are prepared, if they have leadership and courage and be relentless and stick-to-itiveness and grit, they will follow. They will be there. But they need leaders. So that's why tonight, later, you ask yourself, why has divine providence that saw Trump to victory in 16, saw Trump sent to Mar-a-Lago in 20, and saw Trump come back? Divine providence, the hand of God, is working here. But the hand of God works through human instrumentality. Just like Lexington and Concord. Think about it if they hadn't stood up. It's the shot heard around the world for a reason. They took on the most powerful empire in the world with virtually nothing. That's you. And ask yourself, why am I here? What is my task and what is my purpose? What's my fate? What's my destiny? Why have I been given this, that I'm here supporting this great institution, knowing these people, networking, and having the interest to do it and the focus to do it and the love of American history. This republic is in the balance, a constitutional republic. We're either going to have it or we're going to lose it. And history is going to judge and weigh and measure us. Particularly those of a certain age, the boomers. We haven't had a great track record. We just haven't. And now is the defining moment. And I'm going to tell you, Larry Arnn and Steve Bannon and Donald Trump and many of the people in this room, we're not going to be here for the final victory because it's not coming next year or the year after or the year after that. It took this country, I don't know, 50 years, 60 years longer to get into this, and people went along with it as controlled opposition, thinking you were doing the right thing, and now you understand, after the steal of 2020, of how radical and dangerous these people were and what they were prepared to do to this country and the citizens of this country. So it's your gut check. And if you will use your agency and commit it all, and I mean all, not partially all, we're going to win this. But if we falter, we're going to lose. And we're going to be judged on that in the afterlife, but we're going to be weighed and measured and judged by the history of this country. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Normally I drop the mic and walk off, but I've committed to do some Q&A, so we'll do some Q&A. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. We now have time for a Q&A. If you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to be brought to you.
Well, hold it. I've got a question. Can we take a microphone to Larry Arnn? No, I want to ask a question. Can we get a Can you share with us, give us a minute, why is this moment like 1860? Because you are 1,000% correct, but people need to understand this and understand the depth of the problem we have.
Well, I'm a political philosophy nerd. Things are defined by four causes, and the two most important are the final causes and the formal causes. And the final cause of the United States is in the Declaration of Independence, and we're going to dispute about what that means. There are two opposite readings of it. And the formal cause is the Constitution, and it doesn't work the way it used to. We don't make our laws in the Congress. The president is not in charge of the executive branch. The judges muck around with both legislation and execution. And so those two big things that give America its form and purpose are altered now. And they're entrenched. And so it's hard to fix. Then add the timing of the American Revolution. The American Revolution began in 1763. That's when the British decided, after the 7 Years' War, known as the French and Indian War in our country, that's when they decided to start mucking around in the New World and governing it. And one of the first things they did was they said that there's to be no westward movement beyond the Appalachians. And that's people who'd moved here to get some land. And people made their living off the land at that time. That is the timing. In other words, there was a difference of opinion between London and America about who's sovereign. It came to a head starting in 1763 because of those things. And the war came when it couldn't go on anymore. The Civil War is just the same. In 1854, the point is people want to move west. And slavery, you can't just decide to take your slave with you and go to Kansas or Nebraska, because you have to have a system of law to enforce slavery. Because although the pro-slavery people said the slaves really liked their servitude, they kept trying to get away. And so you need laws to, in the Alabama Slave Code, which is in our Constitution reader, every free white male, slaveholder or no, had to ride posse one night a month looking for runaways. So they tried to kick the can down the road, and war broke out in Kansas and Nebraska. So now something's got to be done, right? And so Now, what Steve just said, we can't go on like this. If we had $37 trillion more, we'd be broke. And we're not broke. We actually probably have 350 trillion in assets. But to take 10% of that and move that 10% further into the public sector, which is how you'd have to pay the debt if you keep consuming at the rate you're going, and then you'll be in a spiral. So the point is, it can't go on. And that's why it's like 1860. Something has to be done for good or ill.
Yes, Mr. Bannon, thank you so much for being here. Callie Holiday, Orange County, California. Would you comment on your incarceration time, what you dealt with there? And full disclosure, I have maids and gardeners in Orange County who I've had for 20 years. I didn't know they were not legal, but they have been family members to me. What do you propose to handle those illegal immigrants? What do we do with them?
Let me take the second part first.
All right.
10 million, Benjamin and other people have done this calculation, roughly 10 million have come in since the high noon on 20 January 2021 until high noon of January 20th of 2024, 25, okay? 10 million. Right now they're getting the, 50,000 criminals, 100,000 criminals. Let's deal with that first. It's not that, we have to deal with that first. Because they have no intention of letting us get those folks out of here. You understand that, right? We're gonna have the biggest fight in this country's history to do that. Right now, they've got us jammed up and they want due process and hearings for everybody. President Trump said yesterday it's 200 years. No, they got to go now. And we don't have everybody on our side of the football. Trust me, you're going to have Wall Street saying, oh, they add 1 or 2% to the GDP. The corporations are going to say, hey, they cut costs because low-skilled workers, they've driven costs down, right? They've impoverished African Americans, Hispanics, families, and crushed the healthcare system and the education system and the legal. So let's deal with the 10 million that are here. Now, anybody that came here on Biden's watch got to go, or we don't have a republic. We don't have the rule of law. So that has to happen. Let's do that, and then we can address your gardener and your maid. It's not perfect, but if we don't do this, we're just kidding ourselves. And all these people talk about amnesty. We don't need that. We need to get these folks out of here. We need to get them now. The second, let me just tell you, because you guys got to understand something, and I am not kidding. These people are vicious. They wanted to send Trump to prison for that goofy stuff. For 20 or 30 years, you add it all up, it's like 300 years. They wanted to see him die in a federal prison. Understand that. I went there in a misdemeanor, and so did Peter. Although Peter went to a camp, not a prison. Pretty rough camp, though. I did it because separation of powers. I said this committee is not formed right. There's no minority. There's no ranking member. There's no minority counsel. That's why I didn't have any tension. Cheney, these people broke the basic rules of the House. And also the executive privilege of the president. And I'm not going to roll on the president. He gave me executive privilege. That's the way it's going to be. But remember, the people that sent us to prison and the people that sent over the criminal charges to Jack Smith to send Trump to prison for hundreds of years crawled on their belly to the White House to get blanket preemptive pardons, and all of them took it, and their staffs. They know the crimes they committed. They know their criminality. These people, Nancy Pelosi, all of them, they're demonic and they're evil. This is not, we're not in a, hey, in 1860, They had argued this thing for a long time, and it got past the parts of argument. Now, they say, oh, we're anti-democratic, we're going to autocratic breakthrough. Hey, last time I looked, we just kicked your ass in a national election, right? And we have a coalition of African-American men and Hispanics and Asians and white working class and middle class and traditional Republicans. It's like 1932 if we deliver. Why do you think they're trying to chop block us every day? To delay is to deny, to make sure they get to the midterms. So Hakeem Jeffries can raise $2 billion for a handful of seats and impeach President Trump early in January of 2027. Their playbook's quite obvious. So here's what prison's like. It's hard and it's dangerous, and you folks better get ready, because a lot of this audience will be going to prison if they win. They won't stop. Of course they're going to come after you. They're going to try to bankrupt you, debank you. The reason they did it before, they didn't think we were coming back. They know next time they're going to put the leadership. And I said, have a talk with yourself tonight. Check into your soul tonight. I mean, check into it. What do you think? You don't think the Patriots in 1775 knew what was at stake? You don't think they knew when they said sacred honor? Their lives and their fortunes, they understood it. That's the DNA that built this country. That's what it's going to take. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be very hard. Not just that, the scale of this is so much bigger. And the institutions are so much bigger. And Trump's not going to be here forever. Although he did put on his merch site today, Trump 28. I'm all in. A man like that comes along once a century, trust me, right? Thank you for the questions.
Hello, Mr. Bannon. You had me at War Room Impeachment. Remember that? Okay. I have a question for you because...
You're an original gangster.
I'm original gangster. That's what you told me. Yay. I got a question because my brother is he's a MAGA guy in Silicon Valley. His wife is a high-up executive for one of the tech firms. She goes to Davos every year. Okay? That's what we're dealing with here. So on our family group text, I was told the other day that the only people who would ever vote for Trump are the reason why they don't care about the way the stock market goes is because they have no money, and that's why they don't care, because they have no money in the market. But his question to you is, how do we respond to things like that? Because we know it's not true. I mean, I'm a MAGA person. I got a heck of a lot of money in the market. What's the response to that?
It's 100% true.
Yeah.
It's 100% true. Wall Street Journal, when we walked in here, the top 19 families in this country made $1 trillion in the last, since January. $1 trillion, 19 families. This is what do you think they fought for in Lexington and Concord? You had basically a worthless aristocracy that corrupted Commons. They didn't see Commons as an out because Commons was bought and paid for. And monopolistic power, the British East India Company given by the Crown. It's kind of the same system you got today. It shouldn't be lost on you that Sam Adams and John Hancock and a couple of three of the patriots, our sacred founding fathers and revolutionary generation and good and tough men, were smugglers, right? They were a little outside the system. They didn't like monopolistic power of the British East India Company. This is the system you have today. I think it's 70% of the people in this country, 70% of your fellow countrymen own no real assets and no financial assets. Your sister-in-law is correct, and you tell her that's the reason Donald Trump's president of the United States. And that's the reason the apartheid state she works in is going to get taken apart. You got to understand something. We have a capitalist system with no capitalist, right? It's all state capitalism or oligarchs. I talked at that World Economic Conference, and I ended, the thing that went viral is the way I ended it. I said, look, we're at a fork in the road, not Elon's, I mean a real fork in the road. We're going to go down two paths. One path is Luigi, what is it, Mangione? He waited, he laid in wait, stepped out, and shot a man at point blank range in the back. Not too American, is it? And he's a hero to a big part of the population, a big part. And he killed, murdered in cold blood, a working class guy that worked his way up, okay? I'm not defending the healthcare system or the payment systems, I'm not. But he's a huge hero for a big part of the population. And you've got our economic populism, economic nationalism. And there's going to be some changes. Number one, we have to make capitalists out of the other 70%. We're going to have to figure that out. That ain't going to be easy, right? Not going to be easy for some of you in this room. Just not. But it's got to happen or we don't have a country. Because we're going to do two paths, either the American Revolution, right, that fought for liberty and freedom and folks to have a shot, or you're going to have the French Revolution. And sure is the turning of the earth, that's coming. If we don't make these changes, that's coming. Look at these riots in the street. Look at the Tesla situation. Look at the viciousness. Look at these protests they're having. You don't think in a second, if they got in charge, they wouldn't be dragging the guillotines out? Don't fool yourself. Look at how they worship Luigi Mangione. Look at it. That's who they hold up as an idol. And so I told this conference, you may not like a lot of what the populist nationalist movement stands for, but you'll learn to live with it, which is a big difference in the alternative. And that's the fork in the road we're coming to. Can we have a microphone down front?
We have time for one more question over here.
Good evening. I'm Ted Stein. I'm from southeastern Iowa. Driving here today, we were talking in the car a little bit about the arithmetic of the 10 million. And if you think about it, 1,000 judges working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, hearing 2 cases a day would take about 14 years to resolve all the cases that the socialist left want to put in front of the courts. If you were to deport 300 illegals in 20 flights a day, every day of the year, it would take you about 5 years. I'm seriously behind our constitutional rights, but I wonder if you would please comment on some of the writings that I've seen online about the possible suspension of habeas corpus during what I think, and I suspect you do too, is a true national emergency.
100%. I think you have to think through a lot of different alternatives. I told the story today, I'll tell it briefly, that President Lincoln, as he and Seward sat there and they had some smart lawyers, they kept calling it the inherent powers of the Constitution. Because those two guys realized that they were a little edgy there in running this thing. There's a apocryphal story that when Lincoln was elected and came down for the inauguration, right? When he got to Baltimore, Pinkerton, the head of the detectives, that was his bodyguard, said, look, you got all these plug uglies, and Baltimore's a southern city, like Washington's a southern city. So they snuck him in garb. In the dead of night, the train got to the Willard Hotel, 6 o'clock in the morning, gets there, and he kind of regretted that later, but that's how bad Baltimore was. A little bit later, when the war actually starts, they call for, I think, 50,000, 75,000 troops, militia, troops from the various states to come down. It's one of the reasons other southern states said, okay, if you're going to do that, we'll find out who's tougher. They couldn't get past Baltimore. And so Lincoln went up and arrested the city council and the mayor of Baltimore and put him in jail. And the Supreme Court, the Judge Roberts of the Chief Justice Roberts of the time, Tawney, who had written the Dred Scott decision, so he was kind of on a roll. He sent a note over. He sent a note over and said, "Hey, I'm hearing that you've put the city council and the mayor in jail. And Lincoln turned to his young secretary, John Hay, who later became Secretary of State, one of the great men of the 19th century, just a young guy, 19, 20 years old, very young. He said, don't write this down, but just go over to Judge Tawney. Because Judge Tawney says if they're not released in 24 hours, and troops have started coming through. So if they're not released in 24 hours, I'm going to release them. And he said, go tell Tawney, you release them, and I'll throw you in jail. Okay? We're going to have, okay, this constitutional crisis, understand what's going to happen. They're going to go to the Supreme Court, and Roberts and ACB are not going to be with us. Okay? In June or July, you're going to have a constitution. You're going to be back to Andrew Jackson times and Abraham Lincoln times. Because they're going to sit there and you're going to have a judge, which we never had judicial supremacy. That's not in the Constitution. The whole thing is one phrase I think about the Supreme Court. The whole thing was worked out in what, the Election Act of the Judicial Act 1801. You're going to have a constitutional crisis that they're forcing because they know they control the courts. And they're going to get between Trump and his ability as commander-in-chief to protect this country, something he took an oath to heaven for, right? And we are going to have a decision because I don't think Donald John Trump is going to back off, and I don't care what the Supreme Court of the United States says about it. Okay? Remember, it's going to be a firestorm because I think he's going to say, I hear you, just like Jackson did. Now, you implement it, and we're going to be in it right then. These converging crises is going to be one after the other after the other. A lot of people, in closing, a lot of people are going to get tired. A lot of people are going to say, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. I got to go on a sailboat. I got to quit. I cannot do this. That's the only way we lose. It's the revolution. We just waited them out and fought to the end. And finally they said, we can't do this, these guys. They're too crazy. We got to give it up. It's what you have to do. It's kind of the Union Army situation in the North. Remember, Lincoln did not run the second time as a Republican. He fired his VP, Hannibal, and got a Democrat from Tennessee to run as VP, a national union party, was it called? And until Atlanta fell, remember, Lincoln gave that memo to his cabinet. They think Trump gave some memos to his cabinet. He gave a memo, in August of 1864? That kind of said, hey, we got into this, and I'm going to see it through. Kind of open-ended about what he was going to turn over in the time of a defeat in March, because they had so much riding on it. Now, Atlanta fell, and the Union Army came, and he won in a landslide against his own general, McClellan. The two times in this country's history, the Revolution and the Founding and the Civil War and Reconstruction, and then you had the Great Depression and World War II. This is the fourth, and this is the worst, because all the forces of the world are opposed to us as patriots, opposed to us. They don't want America as a constitutional republic with a vibrant, strong working class and middle class that decide their matters here in the United States and put American citizens first and the country first. The stakes couldn't be higher. And if you quit, we lose. If you do not quit, we will win this. And all of us may not be here at the victory. It may be decades away. And that is as it should be. So think about that tonight. If you make the commitment and you've got the grit and determination, I know you have, because we've seen it in 21 and 22, two of the greatest years in American history, when the lion and winner was in Mar-a-Lago but would not quit, and like Cincinnatus came back to save his country. Let's do this.
Just before President Trump concluded his first 100 days in office, we visited Stephen K. Bannon. He's a longtime Trump advisor and supporter who backed Trump's first campaign in 2016 and briefly served with him in the White House. We found Bannon in the War Room, which is the name of the cluttered podcast studio where he produces a daily video stream supporting his own brand of populist politics. We talked about Trump's first 100 days in office. We talked about tax rates for the wealthy. Bannon says he supports the working class. And we also talked about a constitutional crisis that Bannon says he foresees. Let's watch.
You have to look at this as a revolution. Because it is a revolution. It's a revolution about the America's role in the world, our position geopolitically, the global commercial relationships, plus the administrative state and how the country's governed. And if you look at that, the various verticals we look at, it's just he's so much farther down the path than and so much more aggressive than I think anybody would ever thought.
Certainly a lot of attention, but help me understand how much has really changed. I've heard you talk about government spending. Doge has gotten a lot of attention. Elon Musk has a lot of attention. Analysts have said the actual savings are not that great. It might end up costing the government something.
Well, first off, I do think in Doge, because remember, you had these verticals like ending the kinetic part of the Third World War, sealing the border and starting mass deportation. And the middle, the existential threat is the government spending and how we finance it, et cetera. The other part is taking on the administrative state. I think, and I've had tremendous disagreements with Elon Musk, I do believe you had to have a trauma-inducing force like Doge to kind of rattle the administrative state and let folks know, hey, this is going to be very serious, that there's actually going to be a search for waste, fraud, and abuse. But in addition, programmatically, we're going to come back and take apart the administrative state brick by brick. In that regard, it's kind of shock troops. I think they really served a purpose. Now, to the degree that they find actual $1 trillion, which I was always skeptical about, in waste and fraud, I was highly suspect of, but there will be something. I've actually called for an audit of that. Two things. I've called for, let's make sure we know specifically what they actually found, and let's get that codified, right? So we don't then have to, then maybe we have to cut less of programming. Number two, there also has to be a certification that no data or data sets of American citizens have gone anywhere except to the Trump administration and or the U.S. government.
You have doubts?
Trust but verify. Trust but verify.
Meaning you don't assume that something has gone wrong, but you don't know if something has gone wrong.
Number one, I don't. When you talk about waste and fraud, and remember, it was this show that kept harping on he's got to cross the Potomac and go to the Pentagon. And look, I don't go after the Pentagon because I'm a dove. I'm a hawk. You know, a naval officer for many years. After sea duty, served in the Pentagon. Daughter went to West Point. She deployed with the 101st to Iraq. So we have skin in the game. But when you talk about waste and fraud, if you're not to the Pentagon kind of first, you're not serious. Eventually they went to the Pentagon, but so far it's crickets.
You want to cut defense spending.
It's not that I want to cut defense spending. I want to balance defense spending to what the national security needs of the country are and our allies. But I think President Trump's laid out, first off, the model we have is not sustainable. The model is essentially the global capital markets are a casino. It's not about long-term investing. A couple of companies in the tech business are at the top, and that drives the metrics. Our beloved military has essentially become rent-a-cops for the casino. That's not appropriate. It's one of the reasons we've had problems with recruiting in the past. That a lot of people just don't understand the task and purpose of the military, what we're trying to accomplish. I think President Trump, in trying to get to this hemispheric defense, right, from Greenland to the Panama Canal in the Central Pacific, the three-island chain, you look at America strategically that way, that we're off the Eurasian landmass, finally, after these bloody wars of the 20th century, that it's time now not to come home, but to focus on our defense and have expeditionary forces if they want to go. The American people, including progressives, should be outraged at this very minute. We have two carrier battle groups in the Red Sea protecting the Suez Canal to be open so that Europe, the same Europe that the EU is cutting a deal with China that says they may not decouple, as our deals are saying you kind of have to, right? They're saying we're not going to decouple. We're defending Europe's trade routes where the Royal Navy has a destroyer, the Italian Navy has a corvette, and the French Navy has a frigate. And we have 2 carrier battle groups. So it's just disproportionate what the United States has been forced to do for kind of global security. It's time for other people to pick that up. One of the best ways to do that, and President Trump's done a tremendous job, is focusing on hemispheric defense. Now, the Pentagon is, to me, look, we have a $900 billion NDA, National Defense Authorization Act. In the reconciliation, they're talking about $150 billion of new stuff, new weapon systems. In a perfect world, maybe that's attainable. Maybe you can do that. We're not in a perfect world.
What have you thought about as the president imposed tariffs on China, raised the tariffs on China dramatically, then backed off on key products, and then talked about making a deal with China even though there's been negotiations? Why do you think he changed so much?
Well, number one, I think we started a process with the nations of East Asia. You have Japan, you have South Korea, you have Taiwan, Philippines, Vietnam, and now India, all in discussions around a basic architecture, right, that would lead, I believe, to decoupling of the Chinese Communist Party in these new trade relationships. The Chinese Communist Party, because they've been preparing for this for 20 or 30 years, we went up the escalatory ladder very quickly to 125% and then 145%. Okay? You went up that escalatory ladder very quickly. I think the nations, particularly East Asia, which are me central in getting this done, have come now our side. They kind of stacked up for Besson to get these deals done, or at least to get the architecture of it done, not the actual finished deals, but the terms
we have
agreed.
no deals yet that we know
Well,
of.
but you do have, I think this week, they're talking about maybe 2 or 3 memorandums of understanding on the architecture of it. And then, of course, you'll work for a while to work out the complexity of the small print here. But President Trump went in full force. He's got his own negotiating style. I think he's been quite smart about how to do this, and he's obviously wants to make sure that the store shelves are not totally empty. I mean, as of yesterday, we have a full embargo on Chinese goods.
Except for consumer electronics, iPhones, anything that we consider truly valuable.
some of that's starting to come through as we alleviate somewhat.
Does
I think
he
it's
look
part
weak by changing all the time?
I don't think he looks weak. I think he looks like a very smart deal guy trying to move the chess pieces, right? The Chinese, my philosophy is they only understand one thing. That's smash mouth. Because since the World Trade Organization, look, they were a backward, Lao Beijing developing agricultural society when the Bush regime bailed them out after Tiananmen Square. Let's take the series of World Trade Organization, most favored nation. They totally gamed the system around us. President Obama negotiated that really terrific cyber pact in 2015. They never lived up to anything they agreed to. Hong Kong in 2019, they totally walked away from a deal to keep Hong Kong independent and turned it into essentially a slave camp. Also, Trump negotiated for 2 years the Lighthizer deal. Remember, for 2 years, Lighthizer Navarro negotiated a deal with Li He.
Trump's trade negotiator.
2 years to negotiate a deal that would couple actually the two economies into a global economy, to take away what we call the 7 deadly sins, state-owned industries, their ability to export deflation, all of that. So no, they just tore the deal up. Then later, the skinny deal. They didn't meet any of the standards of the skinny deal that was signed in January 2020. So they're not essentially trustworthy. President Trump, I think, believes with Besson, as Besson says, they can take this less than we can, that they're going to get them to the place that they want, which will be appropriate tariffs and also give incentives to American manufacturing to bring manufacturing back. Now, is it a perfect process? No, but in any complicated, what he's trying to do, and this is what amazes me in 100 days. In 100 days, he's essentially saying, I'm going to change the world's commercial interactions with each other, right? In integration points. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be lost on you that now one of the nations that we set on the reciprocity, on the reciprocal tariffs, even though a little of the numbers sound outrageous, when you looked at the non-tariff barriers, the currency manipulation, the counterfeiting, there were not a lot of people sitting there going, no, we don't do that. That's a lie from the Americans. All of them came, and I think we're in agreement that there are some problems, and those problems have to be worked out.
I want to ask about how some of these things fit together. You referred to the administrative state. You're talking about various parts of the government that do various things, including regulating Americans. But some of the agencies that have been targeted do things in the world that relate to the competition with China. I was in Beijing recently, and sitting with a guy, and he brings up to me that he was actually sad that Voice of America was shut down because he practiced his English listening to Voice of America. I was talking with another guy who said, I was looking into the Uyghurs, and Radio Free Asia had reporting on the Uyghurs that was absolutely not available inside China. If you're concerned about China, was some of this an own goal for the United States?
No, I don't think so, and here's why. And I'm glad you brought up the Mandarin language and the Chinese. That was replete with Chinese agents and had to be broomed anyway. And I think you're going to see a major investigation into Voice of America, the Mandarin language thing. They're the ones that cut Miles Guo off first time ever in a live interview in April of 2017. He's giving an interview where he's talking about the financial corruption.
This is a dissident, a Chinese
dissident. A Chinese dissident, a billionaire. But he's giving a live interview. I didn't even know him at the time. I just was following his YouTube videos because they were so kind of outrageous what he was saying about the Chinese leadership. He was giving a live interview on Mandarin language on Voice of America. And it was pulled. They actually came to my office in the White House and said, hey, just pulled some dissidents interview live.
So the answer is to shut it all down?
Well, I think what President Trump is going to do, and Kerry Lake and others, Brent Bozell, is take the whole thing down to its statutory deck plates and then rebuild it. It had become a totally politicized wing of really the progressive left, and it had to go. I mean, the criticisms it made of President Trump were outrageous, just outrageous. So it had to go.
Going into this project, we were asking, how has the first 100 days changed the world? And I think you focused on the effort to put a new trade regime on the world.
And geopolitically. Remember,
geopolitically,
America coming... look, right now you have the post-war liberal rules-based order. It's made on a couple... And if you go around the Eurasian landmass, it is a replica of the Second World War. Okay, the 20th century are wars to control the Eurasian landmass, kind of Mackinder 101, right? The great heartland. And what you see in the post-war era is to have a containment policy from NATO and Western Europe to the Gulf Emirates and Israel to the South China Sea and the Straits of Taiwan up to Japan and Korea. Okay, those four kind of nodes. You have commercial relationships codified by trade deals. We have capital markets, some cultural interaction, but it's American security guarantee. It's one of the reasons we have a $1 trillion defense budget. It's one of the reasons we have 2 carrier battle groups in the Red Sea, keeping the Suez Canal open for the European elites. That has to stop. What we're saying, what President Trump, I think, is saying by this hemispheric defense is that from Greenland to the Panama Canal, we will take care of the Russian Navy. The Russian army is kind of NATO's problem, Europe's problem, and we're there to help. But you're not going to see a massive amount of resources. This is why I think a rapprochement with our ally in World War II, Russia, and the Russian people is so important. I think President Trump's working on that. You totally change not just geopolitics, you totally change, and you couple that with a Russian rapprochement that gets them out of the CCP's camp. You have a complete ability to cut the defense budget, I don't know, $300-400 billion. Wouldn't everybody want that?
I think the president hasn't been clear about what he would want to replace the liberal international order, the rules-based international order, whatever you want to call it, or even if he does want to replace it. There is a camp that believes that he wants to transform geopolitics. There's a camp that believes that he just wants to spruce things up and make them work better. Do you feel you understand what is supposed to come after? What is supposed to come after?
I think it's back to the Treaty of Westphalia. You have strong, independent nations, right, with the United States looking to itself first and its citizens first, with the understanding is if America's strong, healthy, and prosperous, the world can be at peace. And now you're seeing a shift, and that's why people are throwing their toys out of the pram, all the Atlanticists, right? And I don't want to say the Atlanticists are racist, but to me, and having been in the Pacific Fleet and spent so much time in Asia, coming to Washington, D.C., it actually stunned me how provincial this town is and how provincial D.C., New York, and Boston, that Acela corridor, is about just thinking about a small portion of Northwest Europe. Mm-hmm. It's like the entire world revolves around the United States and Northwest Europe. It's a massive, massive globe. And I think President Trump recognizes that.
Is there a risk, though, to pulling down a system that did make the United States the dominant power of the world for 80 years and kept the United States the richest and most powerful country in the history of the world for 80 years?
When you say that, let's talk about that. Is that true? It made the elites and oligarchs in the United States
You're talking about who benefited. But the
talking-
United States as a whole, the GDP is pretty big.
But the GDP, what is GDP? Just a set of numbers. How's it rolled down to working class? Working class and middle class people are in a worse shape they've ever been. You have 9 million people working two jobs right now. You have $1.7 trillion of college debt. We don't know how it's going to get paid off. There's $1.4 trillion of credit card debt, 10% that is defaulting all the time because people are trying to use that to make a living. The concentration of wealth, the top 19 families in the country just made $1 trillion here, I think, since the beginning of the year. The concentration of wealth for the people that ran the system, for people that ran the post-war liberal rules-based order and go to the Atlantic Council and hang out in Paris or go to the defense contractors thing in the arms merchants in Munich, it turned out great for them. But for the basic Americans on whose shoulder it rests, they got screwed and they've been screwed. And now they're looking at a country that is flooded with illegal aliens at the lower level, and they got every visa program in the world to take every high-tech job they got. Any kid in this country under 35 years old is nothing more right now economically than a Russian serf. They're not going to own anything. We're trying to break up the apartheid state in Silicon Valley. And at the same time, trying to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. That's populism, and that's economic nationalism.
So much to follow up on. You are favoring taxing the wealthy.
Big.
The president has recently signaled some openness to a slightly higher tax rate. I believe in at least one interview, he's also started to take that back and say, I have to make sure I don't pay a political price.
Which means he's running again. The subtext
Well,
that was a win-win for me. Because when he said it, first off, they had given him the wrong information on Bush. Because Bush principally raised the taxes on the wealthy.
Yeah.
Right? This is a massive tax cut for the working class and middle class. It extends his original tax cuts, plus no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. It has to be paid for. The thing I took from that interview, when he talks about, hey, I heard it's politically, it could hurt me, it could hurt on a re-election. Trump 2028, that's when his merch site lit up.
Does it bother you that that's unconstitutional?
That what's unconstitutional?
Running for a third term.
Steve, as I told you, I'm sure we're working on some things that are well within inside the Constitution, and it'll be very. I think people will agree that it'll be very smart work.
Give me an example of
one
thing.
I don't want to whet your appetite. Let's get through. Let's get through the 100 days.
You've already whetted my appetite.
Let's get through. No, because it's exploding liberals' heads, progressive heads. That Trump's going to be with them forever. We are. Listen.
Well, I'm just interested in the Constitution.
In 2015. Or 2014, when I came out and said, hey, we're going to throw all in for Trump, the odds were very long. He polled at 0. I've seen a lot longer odds than Trump 28. And at the appropriate time, after we get through his repositioning of America and the world and changing the post-war international rules-based order so that it focuses on American citizens in our country, then at that time, probably closer to the 26 midterms, I'll roll it out.
We've opened so many parentheses. Let's close a couple of them. You talked about tax cuts and tax increases for the wealthy.
Yes.
And looking after the working class.
The math can't work any other way.
Why would an administration filled with billionaires from the top on down, and including the world's richest man, do anything for the working class? Really? Wouldn't they look after their own interests?
I didn't say we were not going to have a little resistance to this. Look, President Trump's, our coalition, right, does have these billionaires that kind of came in, particularly after we won on November, but the coalition is expanding. African-American men, Hispanics. Right now we have the chance to increase this in the midterms. One way we do it is being straight with the American people. What makes sense, I don't want to raise taxes on the wealthy. I'm not some guy who says tax the rich. I'm saying right now, the math simply doesn't work.
Let's close the parentheses on the Constitution, which we brought up. Clearly, you're in favor of mass deportations, and the president has made some high-profile moves in that direction, and has run up against judicial resistance, including from people appointed by the president.
A judicial insurrection.
A judicial insurrection.
Not murder. You've got a judge.
Okay, but wait. You have a unanimous Supreme Court saying all 9 of us agree there should be some kind of due process. It might not be a full trial, but somebody should be brought before a judge before they're thrown out of the country. You have a U.S. citizen who was 2 years old taken out of the country, and a Trump-appointed judge said the other day there was no meaningful process. Does it bother you at all as an American citizen that due process is not being followed in some cases?
It bothers me that there's nowhere in the Constitution that talks about judicial supremacy. Nowhere in the Constitution talks about judicial supremacy. What you're seeing is a court trying to step between President Trump and his.
Isn't it just a court checking it against the law to say
absolutely
that's illegal,
not
legal?
They're stepping in the middle of President Trump and his the unitary theory of the executive, or the Article 2, his role as commander in chief. This happened before in our country. It's happened a couple times. A guy named Abraham Lincoln. Chief Justice Taney tried to get in the middle of Abraham Lincoln and what President Lincoln did to the city council of Baltimore and the mayor of Baltimore when they refused to let Union troops pass through Baltimore to the relief of Washington, D.C. in those very early days of the Civil War when it was all in the balance. And Washington could have been very, very easily captured by rebel forces from the South. They blocked it. And what did President Lincoln do? President Lincoln threw the city council and the mayor in jail with no indictment. And Taney went to him and said, "Hey, with habeas corpus, you either indict them tomorrow or they're free." And the apocryphal stories, he sent John Hay over with a message to say, "Tell Taney, if you force this, the president's going to throw you in jail." So he ran as a warlord, and look how many times President Lincoln, in a war, had to resort to emergency powers to do this. I think we've had 7 emergency powers now, or 8 emergency powers enacted by the president. He's fully within his rights as commander-in-chief. And yes, we're coming not just to a constitutional crisis, we're coming to a convergence of crises that are going to start hitting us this summer. One of these is the constitutional one.
I'm glad that you brought this up, because in this very book of mine that I brought, I write about one of the instances with Chief Justice Taney. And it's interesting. Lincoln did suspend the right of habeas corpus in the case of a Maryland man who'd been burning
Full stop.
bridges.
I got Steve Inscape just agreed with me on no.
Hang on. Taney said Congress could do that. Lincoln said, "I think the president can do that." In the end, a few months later, when Congress returned, Congress voted to approve what he had done. In the end, he got back within the constitutional system.
Seward and Lincoln were so concerned that what they had done in that interim time, as you remember, was outside the Constitution. That Seward, because these are the smartest lawyers in the country, right? Seward and Lincoln would sit there and talk about the implicit powers of the Constitution, the implied powers of the Constitution for the chief executive. It's brought up brilliantly in Spielberg's movie Lincoln. I think there's a lot of discussion of that. But you're right, Lincoln did it. That was all paper. They papered over what they had to do after the fact to cover themselves. But in the moment, what President Lincoln did, exactly what President Trump's done. You've had a judge here, Bosberg, try to step in the middle of a commander-in-chief making decisions about aircraft in the air. You can't have right now the hill that the Democrats are dying on is about a human trafficker, right? A human trafficker that is down in a prison, has been sent down to a prison. They're trying to say, every one of these criminal terrorists have due process, it's 200 years before they get out. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. The American people back Trump on this, and they have to go, and they're going to go.
And the argument against due process is just that it's inconvenient. It would take too much time for millions of people.
It's not about the convenience thing is one, but it's just you don't need it. It's not necessary. It's time of war, and they're going to leave.
We could raise questions about the Constitution.
Now you do agree with me now, given your knowledge of Taney and Lincoln.
I agree with you that Lincoln took a disputed interpretation of the Constitution and then got right with it a few months later.
Papered it over. He and Seward sat there forever, by the way, as you know, two smart guys, and figured out step by step how they had to do it.
Well, let's talk about, we can talk about
this is a great day for me. I've had Steve Inscape agree with me on a historical.
I'm sure we'd agree with lots of things if we had a long discussion. Let me ask about another thing, though, having to do with the Constitution and tariffs. This is another instance where the president says there's an emergency. I'm going to raise taxes. Tomorrow I'm going to lower taxes. The next
tariffs.
Day, okay, if you want to call them tariffs, I'm going to raise them. I'm going to lower them.
Did you call them taxes?
They are taxes paid by Americans, according to economists. In any event, whatever we call them, Americans seem to pay them when the imports are brought in. The president repeatedly raised and lowered.
They didn't pay them, and we put the tariffs. Hang on, we put tariffs on Chinese in 2018, and prices in China didn't raise at all.
Well, let's talk about that. We can talk about that separately. But in any case, the president has asserted the right to massively affect the economy and then change it again today and hours later without consulting Congress, because he says it's an emergency. It's gone so far that some Republicans in Congress are trying to reclaim their power. Does it concern you at all that a president could claim the power to completely transform the economy all by himself, just on his say-so?
Well, it's not just on his say-so. It is, he did execute emergency powers to do this, given the emergency that's there, both on fentanyl and on the national security.
But the emergency is, he says there's an emergency. That's all there is.
No, he gave backup document too on the fentanyl issue. And also
Canada?
And the deficits alone, the trade deficit's $25 trillion, brother. That's not an emergency. You can't. The country can't. We have $37 trillion in debt, a $2 trillion, and this year's going to be $2.5 trillion. $2.5 trillion deficit's got to be financed every year. Added on that, we have a $25 trillion trade deficit, and that's not a bookkeeping thing that the Wall Street guys say.
Mm-hmm.
That's resources that went to us, to other countries, $18 trillion to China.
Granting
and
everything you say, would it be possible to work it through Congress, just to pass a bill, do the constitutional thing?
He's called for emergency measures. If Congress had been doing its job on trade and tariffs over the last, let me just guess, I don't know, since they allowed China to come in as a World Trade Organization, they would have some backup from people who say, yeah, we should get Congress in here because they've done such a great job. What has Congress done? Congress sold us out because the bags of money that came from China through Wall Street to buy everybody off in the 90s in the Clintons' time to give China most favored nation a World Trade Organization and let them borrow at the World Bank as a developing nation. Remember, in this budget alone, there's hundreds of billions of dollars of your listeners' money, taxpayer money, middle-class taxpayers, that are going for tax subsidies to back up manufacturing of solar panels and wind generators and all that manufacturing in China that are sold here for the Green New Deal. The scams that we do to support China as a country, including, as I said, use our capital markets and our pension funds to finance their entire industry, but particularly their military and their military technology, is outrageous. So, no, since the House and Senate have rolled over to the globalists for 30 or 40 years, pardon me if I don't take their concerns when somebody steps up and says, hey, look, I'm going to put America and I'm going to put American citizens first. They have less than zero credibility.
You're no more confident in this Republican Congress than in past ones?
Good God, no. I mean, look at with Johnson as Speaker. No, the last one, we were very proud that we turfed out. This show was the leader in turfing out McCarthy. Why? Because the horrible debt deal he did with Biden. They gave him no cap on the debt ceiling and allowed him to spend as much money he did, which was like $6 trillion to the debt. Johnson, I think, may actually be worse because I think he's tapped along the president.
Last question. What is one thing you want to see in the next 100 days?
Just more of the double down, more of the same. I do want to see there's going to be a confrontation. I think the convergence of the financial issue of the big, beautiful bill, particularly of spending cuts, and the simultaneously constitutional crisis that we're hurtling to, is going to make this summer a summer like no other.
Steve Bannon, it's a pleasure talking with you. Thank you.
Steve, always great having you here in the War Room.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Everything's up on the bar. We're all in. We get to decide. Do you want to live on your knees, or do you want to die on your feet fighting? That's the decision you get to make now.